The next morning, the great hall buzzed with noise. Owls still swooped in from the rafters, parchment flapping as letters landed across tables. Most students, however, were already nose-deep in the Daily Prophet. Rita Skeeter's latest article spread wide across benches, her quick quotes quill headline practically glowing, "The boy who conquered the dragon, reckless or remarkable?" Harry shoved his plate forward, appetite gone as the front page of the Daily Prophet glared up at him from every corner of the hall. The moving illustration of Harry mid-stride, charred robes, egg clutched high, face pale with exhaustion, seemed to follow him wherever he looked. He didn't need to open it. He already knew what Skeeter would have written. "I didn't even talk to her this time," he muttered, shoving the paper aside. "And still, somehow, she's turned it into another circus." Hermione leaned forward, bristling. "That's the problem. She doesn't need facts, Harry. She doesn't need truth. The prophet will print whatever sells, and she knows exactly how to stir it up. They should have banned her from Hogwarts the moment she started this nonsense." Harry gave a humourless snort. "I'm used to the prophet twisting things, but she..." He jabbed a finger at the picture of himself still clutching the egg. "She makes it poisonous. She doesn't just make me look foolish. She makes it sound like I wanted all this." Hermione's expression softened, though her voice stayed firm. "Then don't let her decide the story for you. You've already got people who know the truth. People who were there. Us." She paused, lowering her tone so only Harry could hear. "And if you have any more dreams, you come to me too. Not just Padfoot." Harry glanced at her, the sincerity in her eyes cutting through the noise of the hall. He gave a small nod. "All right, I promise." Just then, an owl swooped down and dropped a heavy envelope onto his lap. 2 more landed in front of Fred and George. The twins tore theirs open at once, eyes widening. "Quidditch, hitch after lunch," Fred read, grinning. George smirked. "Looks like the legends of Gryffindor have been summoned." Ron chuckled. "Against Crumb? Rest in peace." Harry chuckled despite himself, folding his unopened letter carefully into his pocket. He said his goodbyes to the rest of his team as he walked with Fred and George. The Quidditch pitch smelled of grass and broom polish, its stands looming empty, except for a few curious onlookers at the edges. Down on the field, a half-circle of students gathered. Harry, Fred and George, Cho, Roger Davies, and the tall, sharp-eyed Slytherin chaser, Urquhart. Cedric Diggory stood at the centre, broom tucked under his arm, looking every bit the captain. Not because of swagger, but because of the easy steadiness in his posture. His Hufflepuff teammates often said he had a voice that could settle nerves before a match, and here it carried clearly across the group. "Right," Cedric began, giving them all a quick nod. "You've all been summoned because you're the best Hogwarts has to offer. There wasn't any lottery, no politicking. Every name was chosen because you've earned it." Fred and George puffed their chest. "Obviously." Cedric smirked, letting them have their moment before continuing. "We'll face either Beauxbatons or Durmstrang, depending on the outcome of their match next week. That gives us time to practice together, figure out how we fly as a unit." Cho shifted slightly, eyes bright. "What's the format? Standard match?" "Mostly," Cedric said, "but it's being billed as a showcase, not a bloodbath. Expect stricter fouls and the ministry breathing down our necks. We're meant to show teamwork, not start another international incident." His eyes flicked briefly toward Fred and George, who both raised their hands in mock innocence. Cho grinned. "We'll behave as long as they do." Cedric's smile warmed, but his tone sharpened. "Don't underestimate this, though. Beauxbatons are graceful flyers, but coordinated. They don't waste motion. Durmstrang..." He paused, his gaze turning serious. "Durmstrang plays hard. They'll test our limits, and they won't care if they knock us out of the sky to do it." especially if it's Crumb. Harry's stomach gave a faint lurch, but Cedric caught his eye and gave him a nod. That's why you're here, Harry. You can match him. Don't think you have to outshine him. Just match him. The rest of us will do the rest. The words landed like a promise, one that settled Harry's nerves. Cedric scanned the group. We'll run our first practice tomorrow morning. Bring your brooms, bring your nerve, and bring your sense of humour. We'll need it. Questions? Fred's hand shot up. Can we place bets on Durmstrang and Beauxbaton? George added, Yeah, I want to place my money Crumb crashes while trying to sneak Hermione a lurk. Laughter rippled across the group, breaking some of the tension. Harry rolled his eyes. Cedric just shook his head, grinning. Dismissed. The team broke apart, chatter bubbling as they drifted towards the castle. Harry lingered a moment, catching Cedric's arm. Thanks, he said quietly. Cedric raised an eyebrow. For what? For picking me, for backing me up. Cedric's smile was easy, almost brotherly. Harry, you've already proved yourself against a dragon, and more importantly, you've proven yourself many times on the pitch. You'll be great. Harry grinned, despite himself. The courtyard glowed orange in the dying light, long shadows stretching across the cobblestones. Students gathered in uncertain clusters, wands in hand, while Moody paced before them, his wooden leg clunking rhythmically. Dark wizards don't duel fair, he barked. They'll blind you, trick you, make you see things that aren't there. Illusions, glamours, disguises. They'll turn a wall into a door, a safe path into a pit. And if you can't pierce through the fog, his magical eye swiveled suddenly to Harry, you're dead. With a flick of his wand, statues along the courtyard walls shimmered and shifted. Where gargoyles had stood a moment ago, now there were robed men with wands raised, their outlines whopping in the light. Another wave of his wand, and a door appeared in the stone, glowing faintly, as if inviting them inside. The spell is Revelio, Moody growled. Simple in theory, hard in practice. Against powerful illusions, you'll need more than a whisper and a flick. You'll need intent. You'll need to want the truth more than the lie. That's the only way it works. He jabbed his staff toward the class. Pairs, one casts, one hides. Let's see who's got eyes in their heads. The courtyard erupted in activity. Pansy Parkinson immediately conjured a false doorway and smirked when Neville stumbled straight into the stone wall. Across the way, Ron managed to reveal a statue Moody had disguised as a wolf, though the spell came out shaky. Harry focused on his own illusion, a towering knight conjured by Moody, sword raised to strike. It looked so real, his hand tightened around his wand. He forced himself to breathe, lifted his wand and shouted, Revelio! The knight flickered, then vanished in a shower of sparks. The crowd gave a collective gasp. Good, Moody rasped, limping closer. Very good. You didn't blink. That's instinct, Potter. That'll save your skin. His magical eye spun, locking onto the rest of the class. Take note. He wasn't fooled for a second. Harry flushed, but before he could reply, a sharp voice cut across the courtyard. Or maybe he just got lucky, drawled Draco Malfoy, standing over the shattered remnants of his own illusion. His attempt had collapsed before anyone could dispel it. Potter loves the spotlight, doesn't he? Always showing off. A ripple of laughter rose from a few Slytherins, but it died quickly when Moody's staff cracked against the stone. Malfoy! Moody snarled. You were fooled by your own trick. Potter wasn't. If you'd rather sneer than survive, by all means, keep it up. But don't expect the Dark Lord's illusions to wait politely while you work on your smirk. The courtyard went quiet. Malfoy's face flushed red, and he muttered something under his breath. He didn't meet Harry's eyes. Moody turned back to Harry, lowering his voice just enough that only Harry caught it. Trust what you see, Potter. Don't let anyone else decide it for you. You keep that edge sharp, and you'll see through more than tricks one day. He clapped Harry on the shoulder with his gnarled hand, the gesture heavy, grounding, and oddly possessive. Harry nodded, though unease prickled at the back of his neck. Lesson's over, Moody barked, sweeping his staff in a wide arc. The illusions collapsed into sparks and smoke, leaving the courtyard plain once more. Homework. Practice Revelio until you can strip a lie bear in your sleep. Truth or nothing, that's the rule. As the students filed out, Malfoy hung back, pale with resentment, glaring daggers at Harry's back. Harry, meanwhile, couldn't shake Moody's words. Trust what you see. He wanted to believe it was just a lesson. But something in Moody's crooked smile made it feel like more than that. He shuffled to the main courtyard with everyone. Harry! He turned to see Cedric striding toward him, broom slung casually over one shoulder. His expression was calm, but there was an unmistakable gleam of purpose in his eyes. Got your letter, right? Cedric asked, lowering his voice a little. First practice is now. Figured we'd get a session in before supper, while the light holds. Harry blinked. Now? Now, Cedric confirmed, his smile easy. Don't worry. You're not late. Fred and George will make sure of that. As if on cue, a booming Potter echoed from the other end of the courtyard. Fred and George came jogging up, Cho not far behind. Roger Davies trailed with a cool smirk, Urquhart looking slightly put out at being kept in Gryffindor company. Time to practice, aye, Fred said cheerfully. Cedric clapped his hands once, decisive. All right, all-stars, let's show each other what we can do. Practice started as they all kicked off the ground. Roger is making saves at all hoops. Urquhart is chasing the ball at lightning speed, and Harry is committing air tricks as he waits to look for the snitch. Cho, darting past Harry with the quaffle tucked neatly under her arm, shot back, Show off! From above, Cedric called plays with the calm confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. Chang, switch sides! Urquhart, cover her lane! Potter, eyes up! Don't chase her approval, stay central. Harry embarrassingly obeyed, adjusting, and soon the rhythm of the team clicked into place. It wasn't perfect. Fred and George clashed with Urquhart more than once, and Cho's elegance and aggressiveness balanced in a strange way. But the sparks of cohesion were there. As the drill wound down, Cedric descended and hovered just above the grass, grinning. Not bad for day one. We'll tighten it up. But there's real potential here. He turned to Harry, voice carrying just enough to be overheard. And you, don't psych yourself out about Crumb. You've got instincts he can't teach. Trust them. Harry flushed, ducking his head, but Cedric's grin only widened, as if to say, I've got your back. As the team drifted down to the grass, laughing and bantering, Harry caught movement in the stands. Crumb stood there, arms folded, face shadowed, watching. He didn't cheer, didn't scowl, just watched, his expression unreadable. Harry's stomach tightened. He didn't know if it was rivalry, suspicion, or something else entirely. But Cedric clapped him on the shoulder and laughed with Fred and George, and for the first time since his name had come out of the goblet, Harry felt the tiniest flicker of pride cut through the unease. The twilight had deepened by the time the All-Stars left the pitch, their laughter and chatter carrying faintly under the cool November sky. Harry found himself walking beside Cedric and Cho, broomsticks slung loosely over their shoulders. That was smoother than I expected, Cedric said, ruffling his hair. First practices are usually disasters. Cho smiled, brushing wind-blown strands from her face. Disasters? You weren't at Ravenclaw's first practice last year. Half the team had trouble mounting their broom because we lost so many upperclassmen. Yeah, you guys were proper rubbish last year, Harry said, not thinking. He realised too late and looked at Cho wide-eyed, who gave a sarcastic scowl. Except you, of course. You were brilliant every game, Harry said with his hands up. Cho shaves a sheepish smile and flicks him on the head with her finger. They both laughed while Cedric cringed. Would be proud of that save, Cho teased, nudging him lightly with her elbow. Though, I will admit, you were brilliant tonight. Harry felt his ears heat but managed to grin. Thanks. Couldn't have done much without Cedric shouting at me every other second. Cedric gave him a playful shove. That's called brilliant leadership, twat. His tone softened. You'll be glad for it when it's Crumb bearing down on you. By the time Harry made it up to the Gryffindor common room, the fire had burned low and Ron was sprawled across a chair with a pile of chocolate frog wrappers at his feet. Well? Ron asked, eyes brightening. How was it? Harry dropped into the chair opposite him, exhausted but grinning. Tough. Good though. Cedric runs it tight, and Cho's brilliant with the quaffle. Fred and George nearly killed Urquhart twice, but that's normal. Ron laughed. Sounds about right. Bet the Slytherin looked like he'd swallowed a dung bomb. Actually, he was all right, Harry said, chuckling. Then, quieter. Cedric thinks we've got a chance. Against Crumb, even. Ron whistled low. That's saying something. I'd pay a galleon to see you beat him. Harry smirked, leaning back. Use might get to. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the crackle of the fire filling the room. Harry's eyes grew heavier with each flicker of flame until he finally muttered, I'm heading up. Ron gave a lazy salute. Rest up, All-Star? The world around Harry was hushed, like sound itself had been swallowed. He stood in a dim hall of stone, the ceiling vanishing into shadows. A faint green glow seeped through the cracks in the floor, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Figures lined the walls, but when Harry moved closer, he saw they were only silhouettes, outlines of people he knew, frozen, their faces blurred like smudged ink. He called out, but none of them stirred. Not Ron, not Hermione, not Cedric. Even when he shook the nearest figure, its head lolled lifelessly, mouth open in a silent breath. The air grew colder. At the far end of the hall, a tall chair rose from the shadows. A pale hand rested on its armrest, fingers tapping softly, a rhythm that echoed through Harry's chest like a drumbeat. At the chair's feet crouched a ragged man, hair stringy, movements twitching. He scratched words into the stone with broken nails, looping, senseless, half-formed letters that glowed briefly before fading. Harry squinted. For one moment, he thought the scrawls spelled his name. The ragged man's head jerked up. His eyes glowed white, wild, unfocused. Alone, he hissed, voice cracking. Always. Harry tried to back away, but his feet wouldn't move. The shadows of the frozen silhouette stretched toward him, long fingers brushing his robes, holding him in place. The pale hand lifted, pointing at him. Harry's scar flared white-hot. Pain ripped through his head, and he screamed, wrenching awake in his four-poster, drenched in sweat, the curtains trembling as though something unseen had just slipped away. Harry bolted upright, sweat cooling on his skin, breath shallow. The dormitory was still. Ron snoring softly in the next bed, Neville murmuring in his sleep. He pressed a hand against his scar. It burned faintly. Not like a wound, but like an ember that refused to die out. Was it just a nightmare? Or was it real, like the others had been before? He swung his legs out of bed and grabbed for the battered bit of parchment he kept hidden in his trunk. If he waited, he'd talk himself out of it. Better to write now while the images still clawed at him. Sitting by the faint moonlight through the dorm window, Harry scrawled in hurried strokes. Sirius. Had another dream tonight, different from the last. I was in some kind of hall. People I knew were there, but frozen like statues. A pale hand on a chair and a man muttering on the floor. He looked half mad. I don't know if it was real or not. My scar hurt again. It's getting harder to tell the difference. Dumbledore says to trust him, and I do, but I can't keep waking up like this and pretending it's just bad stew. Please tell me what you think. Harry. He folded the parchment tightly, fingers trembling as he tucked it into an envelope. Hedwig rustled softly on her perch when he crossed to her, tilting her snowy head as though she already knew. Sorry, girl, Harry whispered, stroking her feathers, but it can't wait. Hedwig nipped his finger affectionately before stretching her wings, and with a soft rush of air, she was gone into the night. Harry crawled back into bed, pulling the covers tight around him. The dream replayed behind his eyelids each time he blinked. The hand, the voice, the silence of all those familiar faces. Sleep came eventually, thin and uneasy. Harry woke to the chill of a Saturday morning, the frost from the windows painting silver streaks across the dormitory walls. Before he got up, he grabbed his journal and wrote to Hermione in the same fashion as he did Sirius. That's terrible, Harry. Do you might have any idea what that means? Hermione wrote back. Harry, too tired to think, wrote back, I'm not sure, but can we talk before breakfast? Hermione wrote back instantly, agreeing to meet, and to that he closed the journal. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, and caught Ron watching him from the next bed. Blimey, Harry, you look like you've been run over by a night bus, Ron muttered, tugging his jumper over his head. Bags under your eyes big enough to pack for Hogsmeade. Harry forced a smile. Rough sleep, that's all. Nothing food won't fix. Ron shrugged, grinning. All righty then, let's get some. The great hall was buzzing. Scarves of blue, red and foreign colours waved above heads, enchanted banners fluttering in midair with Beauxbatons fleur-de-lis and Durmstrang's stark crest. The atmosphere was closer to a professional match than a school event. I'll meet you at the table. I got to talk to Hermione real quick, Harry said as Ron nodded and walked off. Harry stood near one of the tall windows, forehead resting briefly against the glass, watching frost creep along the edges like something alive. Voices echoed behind the doors, plates clattering, laughter rising and falling. But out here, everything felt muted. Harry, he turned. Hermione stood a few steps back, scarf loose around her neck, book tucked under her arm like she'd forgotten it was there. She looked tired in the way that came from thinking too hard for too long. You're up early, she said. Didn't really sleep, Harry replied. She hesitated, then nodded once, as if she'd already known the answer. They stood in silence for a moment. Harry turned back to the window. The glass was cold under his fingers. Too cold. He shifted his hand, but didn't pull it away. You had another dream, Hermione said quietly. It wasn't a question. Harry exhaled. Yeah. She moved closer, slow and careful, like approaching something skittish. Was it the same? No, he said. Worse. Different. That got her attention. He swallowed. I was in this hall, stone, empty, and there were people there, people I know. His voice tightened despite himself. You, Ron, Cedric, even Sirius. But they weren't moving. They were like statues. I tried talking to them, shaking them. Nothing. It was like they couldn't hear me. Hermione's fingers curled around the edge of her book. And you? She asked. I could move, Harry said. That was the worst part. I was the only one who could. He laughed under his breath, sharp and humourless. Funny, isn't it? Her eyes flicked to his face. Harry, there was a chair at the end of the hall, he went on faster now. Someone sitting in it. I couldn't see his face. Just a hand tapping, like he was waiting for me to figure something out. Hermione stepped closer again. And your scar? she asked. Harry nodded. Burned, not like before, not stabbing, just pressure, like it was being held down. As he spoke, the air around them seemed to thicken. The frost on the window crept outward another inch, thin, white veins spidering across the glass. Hermione noticed. Harry didn't. "You're exhausted," she said a little too quickly. "I'm fine," he replied automatically. "I've been worse." The words came out sharper than he meant them to. His hand pressed harder against the stone. There was a soft sound. Tick. Hermione's gaze snapped to the window. A hairline crack had appeared near Harry's shoulder, so fine it was almost invisible. "Harry?" she said, very softly. "What?" He frowned. "What is it?" The crack crept slow and deliberate, stretching outward like something testing its reach. Harry felt focused, clear, the way he did right before things went wrong. "I'm not scared," he said. "You know, I'm just tired of everyone standing still, of waiting, or of being the only one who has to move." The glass creaked. Hermione stepped fully into his space now, her voice low and steady. "You need to breathe." "I am breathing." "No," she said. "You're pushing." "I'm not doing anything. Yeah, Harry snapped. The crack jumped, spreading another inch. Hermione reached out and caught his wrist. The contact was immediate, and so was the window shattering. The pressure in the air shifted, like a held breath released too fast. The frost rushed into the hall. Hermione quickly let go and rushed into the corner of the great hall. Harry sucked in a sharp breath like he'd just surfaced from deep water. He looked back to the shattered glass. His stomach dropped. "I didn't," he began. "I know," Hermione said. Her face was pale now, eyes sharp with calculation rather than fear. "Harry," she said carefully, "have you noticed that things respond more quickly lately?" He frowned. "Respond how?" "To you," she said. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The truth hovered just out of reach, uncomfortable and slippery. "I just want it to stop," he said finally. "The dreams, the waiting, the feeling like something's coming and no one's saying it out loud." Hermione's expression softened, but there was something else underneath it now. Worry, edged with something colder. "I know," she said, "but you can't force it." Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Ron's voice, Fred's laughter drifting closer. Hermione glanced toward the sound, then back at Harry. "Listen to me," she said. "Whatever this is, it gets louder when you're like this, tired, angry, alone with it." "I wasn't alone," Harry said quietly. "You were there." Her breath caught. "Yes," she said. "And that's the problem." Before he could ask what she meant, she stepped back, smoothing her scarf as if nothing had happened. "We should go in," she added, "before Ron eats everything." Harry nodded, though his eyes lingered on the window, now being repaired by a ministry official. Later, they joined the flood of students heading out onto the grounds, following the trail of voices and banners up toward the towering Quidditch stadium. Ministry officials stood at each entry arch, checking passes, their cloaks billowing as they barked orders to keep the aisles clear. Harry caught sight of Arthur near the staff, looking unusually stern as he gestured with a clipboard, though he winked when he spotted the boys. Inside, the stadium gleamed with banners charmed to shimmer in sunlight. Whole sections of students were already chanting, half the school adopting Durmstrang's chants for Crumb, the other half swept up in the elegance of Beauxbaton's team. Harry, Ron, and Hermione found their seats high in the Gryffindor section, the pitch stretching out below like an emerald sea. Ron was practically bouncing, placing a bet with Fred and George. Harry, despite himself, grinned at Ron's excitement. The atmosphere swelled to a roar as the announcer's voice boomed magically across the pitch, calling for the teams to enter. The stadium roared to life as banners shimmered overhead, icy blues clashing with blood-red standards, enchanted to ripple like real flames. The whole place trembled with the stomping of feet and shouted chants. "Welcome!" boomed the announcer's voice, rolling across the stands like thunder, "to the first ever All-Star School Quidditch Tournament. Tonight, Durmstrang Institute faces Beauxbatons Academy of Magic." Durmstrang entered first. 7 stocky players in blood-red robes, flying in tight formation. Their entrance was brutal and efficient, broom handles snapping forward in perfect sync, bodies like spears. At the head soared Victor Crumb, chin low, eyes locked ahead. The crowd erupted. Whole sections of Hogwarts students chanted his name. Ron was on his feet, screaming so loud his voice cracked. Harry sat back, arms folded, half amused by Ron's obsession. Then Beauxbatons swept in, silver and sky blue uniforms catching the light. Their formation was almost balletic, looping and weaving in graceful spirals, scattering showers of golden sparks from their wands as they flew. Their seeker, a tall, raven-haired girl, executed a perfect dive that ended with her skimming the pitch before rising smoothly back to formation. The crowd oohed, enchanted by the elegance. Fred cupped his hands to his mouth. "Beautiful, but I've got 5 galleons on 100.5 Durmstrang spread," George echoed, and a section of Gryffindors howled with laughter. Harry couldn't help but grin. The whistle split the air, chasers bolted forward, the quaffle flashing between hands. Beauxbatons' chasers were quick and fluid, darting in arcs that had the Durmstrang beaters grunting in frustration. For the first 10 minutes, the French girls controlled the field, scoring twice in seamless coordination. But Durmstrang wasn't built for grace. They were built for brute force. Their beaters smashed bludgers with bone-shaking swings, sending one screaming past a Beauxbaton keeper so close it ripped threads from her sleeve. Soon, the French side had to spend more time dodging than passing. Harry tracked Crumb. He hardly moved, circling, waiting, predator-like. Every so often his hawk eyes flicked downward, scanning for the snitch. "Look at him," Ron muttered reverently. "That's patience. That's genius." A bludger cracked against a Beauxbaton chaser's broom, spinning her off course. The quaffle dropped into Durmstrang hands and, crack, another goal. The Durmstrang supporters erupted, stamping so hard the stands shook. Beauxbaton rallied. Their seeker cut across the pitch in a feint, diving as if she'd seen the snitch. The stadium gasped. Crumb reacted instantly, diving with her, but she pulled up gracefully at the last second, sending him shooting past in a blur. The stands went wild. "Ha!" Fred shouted. "Outsmarted! That's what you get for glaring all match, you Bulgarian broomstick." Ron turned crimson. "She didn't catch it though, did she?" The real snitch appeared minutes later, a glitter of gold near the Durmstrang stands. Both seekers streaked toward it, bodies low, broomsticks trembling with speed. Gasps followed their dive, the stadium tilting with them as they plummeted. Harry leaned forward without realizing it. They were neck and neck, fingers outstretched, when Crumb rammed his shoulder into the Beauxbaton's seeker. She spun out violently, clutching her broom to stay aloft. Gasps turned to outrage, boos ringing through the French section. But the referee's whistle didn't blow. Crumb's hand snapped shut around the snitch. The roar was deafening. Half the stadium exploded in chants of his name, the other half jeered furiously. Beauxbaton's captain gestured wildly at the referee, but it was no use. Durmstrang had won. The stands were still seething as students filed out, French voices raised in protest, Durmstrang chants thundering back in response. Professors barked orders to settle down, but it was like trying to calm a hurricane. Harry trailed behind Ron, who was still crowing about Crumb's brilliance. Fred and George jeered back at a cluster of Beauxbaton girls who shouted something sharp in French. The air was charged, almost electric, with rivalry spilling into every corner of the stadium. And then, just ahead in the milling crowd, Harry saw him. Krum stood in the open, shoulders square, still in his robes, snitch clenched casually in one fist. His dark eyes weren't scanning the crowd for fans. They were fixed on Hermione, who was resting her head on the rail, her elbow slightly touching Harry's hand. The noise dimmed in Harry's ears like someone had cast a silencing charm. Krum flew forward and stopped in front of the trio. Students slowed, gawking, parting instinctively to give him space. He looked directly at Hermione, his shadow falling across her. "You," Krum said, his voice low, roughened by accent but deliberate. "Will you go to the ball with me?" The words struck the crowd like a bludger. Gasps, whispers, a ripple of disbelief shot through the Hogwarts students around them. Harry felt something twist hard in his stomach. His fists clenched before he even realised it. The air pressure already started to change into a thick resonance. Hermione blurted, her voice high with nerves and embarrassment. Her face was a shade of Gryffindor red. She looked at Harry, who was the same shade of red. But, to Harry's surprise, Hermione's face went from an embarrassed look to something more serious. A face like she was calculating something. She turned away from Harry, removing her elbow that was touching his hand, and said the words that would shock everyone. "Yes, I will." A murmur rolled through the gathered students. Some applauded. Others whispered sharply, eyes darting between Harry and Hermione. Ron's jaw had gone slack, disbelief plastered across his face. Fred frowned and muttered under his breath, "Well, that escalated." Krum gave a short nod, satisfied. "Good," he said simply. With that he turned, cutting back through the crowd like a man who had already won. Hermione stood rooted, cheeks flaming, eyes wide. Harry didn't say a word. He couldn't. His chest felt hollow, his ears buzzing. All around them, Gryffindors and Hufflepuffs were muttering, Ravenclaws casting curious glances, and Slytherins sniggering gleefully. Ginny leaned toward Harry, whispering, "Blimey, that was something." But Harry didn't hear her. His eyes stayed fixed on Hermione, on the stunned expression she wore, and the echo of Krum's words lingered like smoke in the air. She touched Harry's hand, excusing herself, when the wooden railing in front of them split in two. The autumn air carried a sharp chill as Harry sat on the low stone ledge of the courtyard fountain, the enchanted notebook balanced on his knee. The glow of Hermione's neat handwriting faded as quickly as it had appeared. "Sorry, I can't make it tonight. I've got plans. Send me a review of what you guys talked about. This isn't about priorities, it's about safety. Please trust me. We'll talk soon." Harry stared at the words. Ron, sprawled beside him with his arms crossed, gave a snort. "She could have told us sooner. Not wait until 15 minutes before." Harry shook his head, trying to keep his voice even. "If she's busy, she's busy. But the team needs 7 to figure out this egg riddle, not 6. As if on cue, movement caught his eye across the courtyard. A familiar figure gliding through the crowd of students heading in from dinner. Cho Chang, her Ravenclaw robes rippling in the evening breeze, clutching a pad of parchment to her chest. Harry looked back at his notebook and saw the words slowly fade away. He closed the notebook and shoved it in his bag. He hesitated, then stood abruptly. Ron blinked as Harry strode off. "Oi, where are you going?" Harry didn't answer. He crossed the flagstones, hands clenched, and his voice. "Cho!" She turned surprised, then smiled faintly. "Hey," Harry said, suddenly aware of the heat in his cheeks and the stress in his fists. "What are you doing right now?" Cho shifted the parchment behind her back, trying to mask it, but a blush crept up her neck. "Oh, nothing important." Harry cleared his throat, calming down. "We've got a meeting, sort of training." For the tournament. My team. Want to come? Her eyes widened, then lit with intrigue. Oh, yeah, totally, yeah, but I thought Great, let's go. Harry cut her off. Oh, you mean right now? She said, half laughing. Right now. Harry's grin tugged wider. Come on. Ron had caught up by then, stopping short when he saw her walking alongside Harry. His eyes flicked between them like he'd just swallowed a dung bomb. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, but then gave Harry a hearty slap on the back. Well done, mate. Harry's grin deepened. Cho gave a small laugh, tucking her hair behind her ear as the three of them made their way across the courtyard, footsteps echoing off the stone arches. The meeting wouldn't be the same as before, but maybe, Harry thought, it would be even stronger. The empty classroom smelled faintly of chalk and candle wax, desks pushed back to make space for the group. Fred and George lounged on a windowsill. Ginny sat cross-legged on a desk, while Neville fiddled nervously with his quill. All heads turned when Harry, Ron and Cho walked in. Fred raised his brows. Well, look who's joined the rescue squad. George grinned. Sorry, love. You'll have to share Harry with 6 others. Tragic, I know. Cho blushed faintly but held her chin up. I'm here to help, she said evenly, sliding onto a chair beside Ginny. They all simultaneously furrowed their brows in confusion, to which Ron told them all about Hermione's message. I love Hermione like my sister, but if she's not in this 100%, especially considering how close the second task is coming up, and no clues to go on about, I have to say it's a little low, Ginny muttered, her eyes sharp as she looked at the empty seat. I agree, Neville said quickly, though his tone lacked conviction. I'm more interested in Crumb, Fred scoffed. He's 17 for Merlin's sake, and she's a 4th year. Dodgy look, if you ask me. Ron crossed his arms, scowling. Yeah, it is a bit weird. Harry raised a hand, cutting them off. Enough. Hermione's busy, but we need 7, not 6. Cho's in, for now. Cho gave a small nod, her eyes steady. Harry pulled the golden egg from his bag and set it on the table. Its polished surface caught the firelight, gleaming ominously. Every clue for the next task is supposed to be inside this thing, Harry said. So, let's see. He unlatched it. The instant it opened, a hideous screech filled the air, high-pitched and unearthly like metal, tearing underwater. Everyone clapped hands to their ears. Neville yelped and dropped his quill. Ginny muttered, Sweet Merlin, that gets old. Harry snapped it shut. The silence rang almost as loud as the noise had. Fred whistled. Well, that wasn't the same as the last time. Give it another go, Harry. I'm sure it will sing sweetly to us this time. George snickered, while Ginny kicked him in the leg. Harry rubbed his temples. We've tried it like half a dozen times, and it's always the same no matter what we do. All our theories are down in the wash. Cho looked around at everyone, brow furrowed. No, it's not just a scream. Didn't you hear it? The pitch, it sounded warped, like it was stretched, like it was meant to be heard underwater. Cho shifted slightly in her chair when everyone stared at her after she suggested the screech was meant to be heard underwater. I'm not just guessing, she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Back in 3rd year, Professor Kettleburn gave us a whole unit on dangerous water dwellers before he retired. Most people groaned through it, but I found it fascinating. Mer people especially. They're not just monsters hiding in lakes. They've got their own culture, language, even music. Fred arched a brow. Music? That banshee scream was music. Cho gave him a small smile. Not in the air, that's the point. Their songs only make sense underwater. Kettleburn said hearing them properly for the first time is like unlocking a whole new world. Eerie, yes, but beautiful too. I've kept reading about them ever since. The Black Lake has one of the largest colonies in Europe, so it fits. Neville leaned forward, nodding eagerly. That's true. Sprout mentioned the colony once when we studied aquatic plants. Said they sometimes barter with the merfolk for rare ingredients. So what you're saying, Ginny cut in, is that Harry's golden egg isn't broken. It's a puzzle. We've just been listening the wrong way. Cho nodded. Exactly. Put it underwater and the noise becomes a message. That's how the clue will reveal itself. Harry blinked at her, a flicker of relief breaking through the weight of everything else. That's brilliant, Cho. Right, Ron said at last, leaning back. So, we drown it. Not drown, Cho replied, calm but bright-eyed. Submerge. Deep water changes how sound carries. She glanced at the windows, at the black square of night beyond. The lake is best. Untitled document, Fred perked up. Field trip, I'll fetch snacks. You'll fetch detention, Ginny said. Filch lives for nights like this. The classroom door creaked. All 7 heads snapped around. Cedric stood in the doorway, hair damp from the cold, Hufflepuff's scarf looped loosely at his throat. His gaze flicked to the egg on the desk, then to Harry. Didn't mean to interrupt. Harry straightened. You're not... Cedric came in, easy and unthreatening, the way he always did. Like he understood that sometimes rooms needed gentleness. You're working the clue. His eyes rested on Cho for half a second, surprised, and then simply approving before returning to Harry. Good. Listen, you don't want the lake first. Why not? Ron asked, wary. Too many variables, Cedric said. Currents, wind. You'll hear it, but not clean. If you want the message as intended. He rubbed the back of his neck, weighing something, then made up his mind. There's a better place. The prefect's bathroom, deep pool, quiet. Enchantments to keep sound true. Ginny's brows rose. And how would we... I'll lend you the password, Cedric said, tone matter of fact, not magnanimous. Go late. Fewer patrols. Keep the lights low and the steam up. You'll be fine. Ron frowned. You're just giving us that? Cedric's mouth twitched. It's a tournament, not a massacre. We're Hogwarts. He met Harry's eyes steady. I want to beat you because we both did our best, not because you couldn't hear a song. Jo's hand touched the egg with a soft clink. That would make the test cleaner, she admitted. Sound would refract less in a contained pool. Fred sighed theatrically. Alas, my planned midnight lake picnic. Save it for after we're not all expelled, Harry said, but he couldn't help the smile tugging at his mouth. He turned to Cedric. Thank you. Cedric nodded once like it was settled. Passwords pine fresh, go at 11, and bring a towel you don't mind ruining. The bubbles get ambitious. He reached the door, paused, and added without looking back. If anyone asks, you didn't hear it from me. The door shut softly. Ginny exhaled. I take back 2 mean things I've said about Hufflepuffs. Only 2? George asked. 3, if this works. Harry lifted the egg, feeling the faint thrum through its shell. Relief mixed with nerves. We'll move in pairs, he said. Ron with me. Fred and George run point. If you see Filch, cough like dying ferrets. We have a range, Fred assured him, from discreet wheeze to operatic death rattle. Neville, you and Ginny cover stairwells, Harry continued. Aside, Cho. I'll come with you, Cho said quickly, then flushed. I mean, if you need someone who knows what to listen for. I can tell if the acoustics are wrong. Something warm and treacherous tried to lift in Harry's chest. He swallowed it, nodded. Right. Good. I would say let's do it tonight, but we have the All-Star game tomorrow, and we should probably get some rest. Harry rose from his seat as the group nodded in agreement. No matter the outcome of tomorrow, we go to the prefect's bathroom. The castle loomed behind them, lanterns flickering along the old stone bridge as Harry and Cho walked side by side. Their footsteps echoed softly, and the night air carried the cool scent of pine drifting off the black lake. Cho slowed near the balustrade, her hand brushing the cold stone. "I'm still not sure I should have been at that meeting," she admitted, her voice carrying a hint of unease. "It all happened so suddenly. One moment, I was just part of the crowd. The next, I'm sitting there with the egg like I belonged." Harry paused, turning toward her. "We didn't bring you in just because we were desperate," he said. "You saw what none of us could. You figured it out in minutes when the rest of us had been going in circles for days. That's not luck. That's you." She gave a small, disbelieving laugh, eyes dropping to the stone beneath their feet. "You really mean that?" "Yeah," Harry said simply. "You belong in this more than you think." Her lips curved into a soft smile, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Good to know," she murmured, almost as if she was filing the words away. She leaned forward against the railing, gazing out across the black water. Harry joined her, elbows resting beside hers. For a time, the only sound was the lap of waves below, and the distant creak of the castle settling. Cho tilted her head toward him. What about you?" she asked. "You've been at the centre of everything. Rita Skeeter's articles, the ministry circling like hawks. How are you holding up through all that?" Harry let out a low breath, watching it fog in the cold. "I'm managing. I try not to let it in. Skeeter writes whatever will sell. Half of it's lies and the other half is twisted just enough to sting. The ministries know better. They'd rather believe their own stories than face what's really out there." He shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his mouth. "If I thought about it all the time, I'd drown." Cho studied him for a long moment, her eyes steady, thoughtful. Then she nodded slowly, as though she'd just discovered something worth keeping. "That's good to hear," she said softly. Silence fell again, though this one felt gentler, less uneasy. The lake's dark surface caught a thin streak of moonlight, rippling like silver ink. Harry shifted, glancing at her. "You and Cedric," he said before he could second-guess himself. "You seem close." Cho blinked, then gave a sudden laugh, shaking her head. "Close, yes, but not the way everyone thinks." She smirked, eyes warm with amusement. "Cedric's like the brother I never had. He's always looking out for people, always making sure no one's left behind. That's just who he is, empathetic, almost to a fault." Harry smiled faintly at that. "Sounds like him. Honestly, I think he deserves to win this whole thing. The tournament, the glory, it should be his." Cho turned toward him, surprise flickering across her face. "You shouldn't sell yourself short like that. You placed first, Harry. You've proven you're more than capable." But Harry only shrugged, gaze drifting back to the glossy tide of the lake. "I wasn't supposed to be here. I'm just a spare. Cedric's the one who was chosen. I'm only in this because someone wanted to stir trouble." Cho didn't argue. Instead, she shifted closer until her forearm brushed lightly against his where they leaned on the rail. The touch was subtle but deliberate, her warmth grounding against the night's chill. They stood like that, shoulder to shoulder, watching the black water roll slowly under the moonlight. "Well," Cho said at last, her voice barely above the whisper of the waves. "Spare or not, I'm glad you're in it." Harry didn't answer right away, but the warmth in his chest this time he didn't push down. He let it happen, as smooth as the black tides. Morning broke sharp and cold, the sky a pale sheet above Hogwarts. The Great Hall was alive with chatter, but beneath the surface excitement about the All-Star game, Harry could feel the cracks between his friends as Crumb walked in with Hermione that drew much attention. "I still can't believe it. Out of everyone he had to ask her." Fred's fork clattered down. "Not just ask. He's been circling her like a hawk for weeks, then swoops in at the first chance." "Exactly," George said, leaning in, his usual grin gone. He's not subtle. He's hunting. Ginny folded her arms tight. And she's younger, for Merlin's sake. What business does a famous player have hovering over a fourth year like that? Hermione walked over and sat down at the Gryffindor table. The conversation died instantly. Plates became suddenly fascinating. Someone stared very hard at the enchanted ceiling. Hermione clocked it all in half a second. The stiffness, the half-finished arguments hanging in the air like smoke. "So," she said evenly, setting her books down, "you were talking about me." No one answered. She sighed and pushed a curl back behind her ear. "It's not a crime to go to the Yule Ball with someone. Victor asked me politely. I thought about it. I said yes." Ron let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Politely? Hermione, he watches you across every meal like he's trying to solve you." "That's not the same thing," Hermione snapped. "He listens. He doesn't interrupt. And he doesn't pretend I'm invisible just because I'm not shouting." Fred's expression didn't soften. "Fame changes people." "So does pressure," Hermione shot back. "You, of all people, should know that." George leaned forward, forearms on the table. "We're not saying he's evil. We're saying we don't like the way he looks at you." Ron nodded sharply. "Like you're already his." The words landed harder than Ron meant them to. Hermione went very still. "That's not what this is," she said, quieter now. "You don't get to decide what's dangerous for me." Harry sat frozen between them, the familiar pressure building behind his eyes. He wanted to say something, anything, but his thoughts tangled around each other. Loyalty, unease, the echo of frost cracking glass. Cho's smile by the lake. Before he could find his voice, someone stopped at the edge of the table. "Morning," Cho said, cheerful and unaware. She hugged her books to her chest. "I was just thinking about tonight. I still can't believe we cracked it. The egg underwater. It's brilliant." The table shifted. Fred's shoulders loosened. George exhaled. Even Ron looked momentarily relieved, clinging to something uncomplicated. Hermione didn't. Her gaze flicked to Harry just for a second, and whatever she saw then made her jaw tighten. "I see," she said. Cho blinked. "I didn't mean..." "No, it's fine," Hermione cut in, already standing. "Really, if you've solved it, then you won't need me." "That's not what this is," Ginny said sharply. "Cho helped when we were stuck," George added. "That's not replacement. That's teamwork." Then she turned and walked down the length of the table, not storming, not running, choosing every step. She slid onto the bench beside Victor Krum and his Durmstrang entourage. Krum shifted wordlessly to give her space, his heavy-lidded gaze sweeping the hall, pausing briefly on the Gryffindor table before settling forward again. At the Gryffindor table, the silence was deafening. Cho's face drained. I didn't mean..." "Hey." Fred's voice was uncharacteristically gentle. "You didn't do anything. Just a bit of drama you're not in any way tied to." George nodded firmly. "Hermione was wound tight before you ever opened your mouth. This isn't on you." "She'll come round," Ginny added, her tone softer now. "Don't blame yourself. We needed you last night, and you came through." Cho bit her lip, still uncertain, until Ron finally looked up, his ears red. "It's not your fault," he mumbled. "Really. It's her choice." The tension eased, if only slightly. Cho exhaled, nodding. Then she slid onto the bench beside Harry, her shoulder brushing his as she set her books down. Harry swallowed, heart tight. Across the hall, Hermione bent toward Krum as he spoke low in her ear, her face unreadable. But here, beside him, Cho gave a small, nervous smile, and somehow that steadied him more than he expected. The group rose together, the scrape of benches lost in the general rush toward the doors. The cold November air hit them as soon as they stepped outside, crisp and biting. Students swarmed down the lawns in colourful knots, waving charmed banners that shifted between Cedric, Cho and Harry's names. Ron shoved his hands deep into his pockets, grumbling as they walked. All anyone cares about is Crumb anyway. Bet half the school's rooting for him over us. Let them, Ginny said flatly. He can have the noise. You'll see who they cheer for when Cho scores her first goal. Cho's cheeks flushed at that, but she smiled faintly. Thanks. I just hope I don't drop the quaffle on the first pass. The locker room smelled of polish and fresh air from the open slats above. Brooms leaned against benches, helmets rested in neat rows, and laid out across the benches were their new uniforms. Robes of midnight blue, trimmed with silver and gold, a phoenix stitched across the chest. Its wings shimmered with all four house colours, catching the torchlight. Fred gave a low whistle. Finally, a uniform that makes us look as good as we fly. George elbowed him. Speak for yourself. Mine's going to look better because I'll be winning in it. Warrington grunted, already tugging his gloves tight. Less talk, more focus. Roger Davis smirked as he adjusted his helmet strap. He's right. Durmstrang's not here to give us a friendly jog around the pitch. Cho buttoned her robes with careful precision, her face calm but her hands steady in that way Harry had come to recognise. Measured, not uncertain. Harry sat at the end of a bench, his own robes folded across his knees. The fabric felt heavier than it should, like wearing the weight of the whole school. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a smaller bundle, Hermione's gloves. The thestral hide gleamed faintly in the torchlight, the unicorn hair lining catching a whisper of silver. Sliding them on, he felt the familiar tingle rush through his veins, warm, grounding, electric. Despite the sting of Hermione's absence, despite the memory of her sharp words, he couldn't imagine taking the pitch without them. He flexed his hands once, twice. Whatever else was fractured, the gloves tied him to where it all began. Cedric stood from his bench, broom in hand, his voice carrying easily across the room. All right, he began. The chatter ebbed away. I know some people think this is just an exhibition match, a spectacle, but it's more than that. Today, we're Hogwarts, not Gryffindor, not Ravenclaw, not Slytherin, not Hufflepuff. One team. Fred and George straightened in unison, grins fading into something sharper. Cho looked up, her eyes catching Cedric's, and even Roger stopped fiddling with his strap. Cedric's tone softened, but it held a steady conviction. We may not agree on everything off the pitch. That doesn't matter now. What matters is that when we fly out there, we fly as one. We trust each other. We cover for each other. We remind Durmstrang and everyone watching that Hogwarts isn't just a school divided into houses. It's home, and home fights for each other. Silence lingered for a beat. Then Fred clapped his hands once hard. Couldn't have said it better myself. George grinned, eyes fierce. Let's give them something to choke on. Warrington cracked his knuckles, muttering, About time. Roger rolled his shoulders, smirk firmly back in place. All right then, let's make it a show. Cedric nodded, lifting his broom. United on 3. The 7 of them leaned in, shoulders brushing, brooms and robes gleaming under the flicker of torchlight. 1, 2, 3, United! They roared, the word bouncing off the stone walls as they surged toward the tunnel. Above, the stadium erupted. The roar of thousands poured down into the passageway, a living tide of sound. Harry tightened his grip on his broom, his gloves sparking faintly with magic. The air ahead was bright and cold, the pitch spread wide and waiting. The tunnel glowed at its far end, the roar of the stadium swelling like a storm. The team jogged forward, brooms in hand, their new robes flashing phoenix fire in the torchlight. Then they burst into the sunlight. The pitch erupted. The stands blazed with charmed banners. Go Hogwarts! Show them unity! Fly high! Fly fast! Thousands of voices shook the air. And then the chant started. Sharp, rhythmic, unmistakably Hogwarts. A seventh-year Gryffindor near the front row cupped his hands and bellowed, "What do we think of Durmstrang?" "Rubbish!" the crowd thundered back, voices rolling from every corner of the stands. The chanter grinned, milking it. "What do we think of rubbish?" "Durmstrang!" "Thank you. That's all right." And then, with a deafening, gleeful fury, "We hate Durmstrang! We hate Durmstrang!" The chant caught like fire. Even Ravenclaws were slamming their palms against the railings, Hufflepuffs waving phoenix banners in rhythm. Slytherins, those not secretly rooting for Krum, howled it with almost vicious delight. Fred and George, flying a pace behind Harry, pumped their fists in time with the chant, grinning like wolves. Warrington cracked a sharp laugh. Roger Davies tilted his broom in salute to the crowd. Cho leaned closer to Harry as they rose into formation, her face half shadowed by her helmet. "Listen to them," she shouted over the roar. "It's like they've already won." The chant still echoed off the mountains when Madame Hooch raised her whistle. The teams lined up opposite each other, broomsticks gripped, eyes sharp. Hogwarts' phoenix crests shimmered, defiant against the stark red and black of Durmstrang. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lee Jordan's voice boomed, magically magnified across the stands. "Welcome to the Hogwarts versus Durmstrang match!" The crowd roared. Flags whipped in the wind. The Hogwarts chant morphed into a rumbling drumbeat of stomps and claps. "On the Hogwarts side," Lee continued, milking every syllable, "we've got the unbeatable Beta twins, Fred and George Weasley." The twins swooped their brooms up with identical spins, bowing dramatically as the Gryffindor section went wild. Roger Davies, Ravenclaw's own golden boy, taking the pitch at Chaser. A wave of Ravenclaws shrieked, enchanted banners flashing his smirking face. Warrington, yes, a Slytherin, proving tonight that we can play nice for once. The Slytherin stomped approval, though their cheers had an edge. And Cedric Diggory, Hufflepuff champion, and the heart of Hogwarts himself. The entire Hufflepuff section roared, yellow banners blazing like fire. Cho Chang, chaser extraordinaire, ready to show Durmstrang what real finesse looks like. Harry caught Cho's grin from behind her helmet as the Ravenclaw stands erupted again. And finally, Harry Potter, Phoenix-born, the Seeker who needs no introduction. The stadium exploded. Harry felt the noise crash into him, vibrating through Hermione's gloves, pulsing in his veins. For a moment, he thought of the lake last night, Cho's forearm brushing his, and then of Hermione across the hall this morning, choosing Krum. The weight of it all churned in his chest. Then he shoved it down, gripped his broom tighter, and leaned forward. And on the Durmstrang side, Lee spat the words like something sour, led by Victor Krum himself, the so-called best seeker in the world. Let's see if he can fly as well as his fascination with fourth years. Laughter erupted across 3/4 of the stands. Madame Hooch lifted the quaffle. "Mount your brooms!" 7 Hogwarts players rose as one, phoenix crests gleaming in the sun. Across from them, Durmstrang's red-black line bristled like a wall. The whistle shrieked. The quaffle soared skyward. Cho and Roger shot forward together, streaks of blue and gold robes cutting through the cold air. The Durmstrang chasers thundered up to meet them, broad-shouldered and aggressive, but Cho slipped past with a graceful feint, handing off to Roger at the last second. He spun dramatically, drawing boos and cheers alike, before tossing it cleanly back into her hands. "Chang on the quaffle!" Lee Jordan bellowed over the roaring crowd. "Look at that broom work! Durmstrang don't know which way is up." Cho pulled into a dive, swerving past the keeper. She drew her arm back and... thunk. The quaffle shot clean through the hoop. The stands erupted. Ravenclaws screamed her name. Hufflepuff stomped. Gryffindors waved enchanted phoenix banners. Even a few reluctant Slytherins clapped. "First goal to Hogwarts," Lee whooped. "And it's Cho Chang showing Durmstrang how it's done." Harry felt the sound reverberate through him, pride flickering in his chest. For a moment, the tension of the morning eased, until he caught sight of Crumb across the pitch, glaring at him with heavy-lidded disdain. Durmstrang wasted no time retaliating. Their chasers came in hard, muscling Roger off his line with a brutal shoulder slam that nearly unseated him. Gasps filled the stands. "Oi! Foul!" Fred roared mid-flight, only to duck a bludger a heartbeat later. George swung back with perfect timing, cracking the iron ball toward the offending chaser. The crowd howled with laughter as the Durmstrang player lurched sideways to avoid it. "Beautiful work from the Weasley twins," Lee crowed. "Durmstrang might have the muscle, but Hogwarts has brains and better hair." Roger shook himself off and minutes later redeemed his near fall with a flashy corkscrew pass into the hoop. 2-1. The match surged faster, fiercer. Fred and George harried Durmstrang's beaters with reckless glee, trading bludgers back and forth like a private game of tennis, all while still defending Cho and Roger. Warrington bellowed from the back line, his bulk blocking 2 vicious quaffle attempts with surprising discipline. But Durmstrang pressed harder. Their keeper, a hulking brute, grabbed Cho by the wrist as she attempted another shot. Gasps filled the air. She ripped free, glaring, but the foul went uncalled. "Open your eyes, Hooch!" Lee roared, his voice magically magnified across the stands. "That's not keeping. That's kidnapping." Cho shook it off, regaining possession minutes later. This time she darted low, ducked a bludger, and sent the quaffle sailing cleanly into the goal again. The crowd thundered. "Chang again!" Lee screamed, nearly incoherent with excitement. 2 for Hogwarts, and that's how you answer a foul. Grace under fire. The match continued to go back and forth. Cho darted through the air with Cedric at her side, the two of them weaving impossible patterns between Durmstrang's hulking chasers. Twice she threaded the quaffle through narrow gaps, Cedric sweeping in to shield her from a bludger. The crowd screamed as the score flickered again. Hogwarts 70 to Durmstrang 70. Roger had already been rattled by 2 brutal body checks, and Warrington, though throwing himself at every shot, was sweating under the constant barrage. His saves were strong, but the Durmstrang trio pressed like a tide, relentless, overpowering, their brute force eventually cracking through. "Warrington, holding the line! Barely!" Lee Jordan cried. "Give the man a medal for effort, because Durmstrang's chasers are monsters." On the sidelines, Hermione sat beside Ron in the stands, scarf pulled tight against the wind. She wasn't waving. She wasn't smiling. She was watching him. The moment their eyes met, something clicked. Not comfort, focus. The snitch flashed silver near the sun, gone before Harry could chase it. Across the pitch, Victor Crumb spotted the same thing Harry had. Hermione leaned forward as Harry cut hard left, her breath catching. Harry felt it like a tug between his ribs, a sudden tightening that had nothing to do with the cold. He flew harder. The world narrowed. Crumb matched him instantly, their brooms slicing parallel arcs through the air. The crowd roared louder, chanting Harry's name, but the sound warped, bending inward until it felt like pressure rather than noise. Another glint. Harry dove. So did Crumb. Wind tore at Harry's face as the snitch jittered ahead of them, not darting cleanly now, but hesitating, its path stuttering like it couldn't decide where to go. Harry felt it then. Not strain, rightness. Like the air was leaning toward him. Like if he reached just a little harder. Below, Hermione's hand clenched on the edge of the bench. "No," she breathed. Krum glanced sideways mid-dive and saw her. Saw her watching Harry. Something ugly flickered across his face. He twisted sharply and slammed his shoulder into Harry's broom. Pain exploded through Harry's side. His grip faltered. The snitch vanished upward in a silver streak as Harry spun, air screaming past him. Anger seared through him as he realised what Krum had done. The pressure around him and Krum increased. Krum screamed. Just once, sharp and involuntary, as the pressure scraped through him like fire under his skin. His broom pitched wildly, spinning out of alignment as he lost all sense of up and down. In the stands, Hermione stood. "No!" she breathed. They both fell on the pitch, kicking up mud and snow as their limp bodies slid 10 feet. The pressure built, invisible and suffocating, bending the air between them. Harry wasn't affected, but Krum screamed in agony. "Harry!" Ron's shout cut through everything. Harry's head snapped up. The field collapsed. The pressure vanished as if it had never been there. Krum's broom righted itself violently. He lurched, gasping, clutching his side, eyes wide with shock and something close to fear. Harry wasn't so lucky. When he rolled over, gasping, the crowd had gone deathly still. Krum hovered triumphantly, snitch clutched in his fist. "Durmstrang wins," Lee Jordan's voice cracked hollow with disbelief. "Durmstrang 220, Hogwarts 70. Boos rained down, furious and unrelenting. Fred and George were already shouting themselves hoarse at Madame Hooch, gesturing wildly at Harry still sprawled on the turf. Harry staggered to his feet, fury hotter than the pain lancing through his ribs. His face burned, not from the fall, but from humiliation. Hermione reached him at the edge of the pitch before Madame Pomfrey did. "Are you hurt?" she asked, hands hovering, not touching. "Just winded," Harry said. "He fouled me." "I know." Her eyes searched his face, not for injury, but for something else. "Did you feel that?" she asked quietly. Harry hesitated. "Feel what?" She exhaled, sharp and controlled. "Never mind." Ron returned, scowling toward Krum, who stood across the pitch, jaw tight, watching Hermione with an expression Harry didn't like. Hermione saw it too, and made her decision. "Go, celebrate," Harry said suddenly, the words bitter even to his own ears. "Looks like he wants you to." Her mouth opened, closed. "This isn't..." she began, then stopped. "Later," she said softly. "We'll talk later." She turned and walked away, not toward Harry, but toward space, distance, noise, toward Krum. Harry watched her go, the hum in his gloves fading at last, leaving behind something colder. For the first time, losing didn't feel unfair. It felt like a warning. The Phoenix banners sagged their magic dim. The sound of Hogwarts morning filled the air. Harry felt his throat tighten. But then Cho was there, slipping to his side, her hand brushing his arm gently. "You flew brilliantly," she said, soft enough that only he could hear. He almost snapped, almost spat that brilliant didn't matter when you lost. But the way she looked at him, steady, kind, pulled the words from his mouth. Instead, he nodded, letting her walk beside him as they left the pitch together, the jeers and chants fading behind them. Harry barely remembered the walk back to the locker room. The cheers for Durmstrang, the jeers at Krum's foul, Hermione's stricken face, all of it blurred together, pounding in his head louder than the pain in his ribs. He tugged off his phoenix crest robes with shaking hands, leaving Hermione's gloves on until the very last, as if they alone kept him standing. By nightfall, the castle had settled into a restless buzz. The all-star defeat was on everyone's lips. Half the school raging at the injustice, the other half sulking in silence. The Great Hall was tense over dinner, Durmstrang gloating at their table while Hogwarts simmered. When Fred and George found Harry after the meal, Cho close behind them, there was no question where they were headed. The prefect's bathroom, the egg. Ron and Ginny were waiting at the entrance hall, Neville hovering awkwardly with a bundle of herbology notes clutched under his arm. Together, the seven slipped through the quieter corridors, their footsteps echoing against the stone. For once, no one cracked a joke right away. It was Fred who finally broke the silence, his voice unusually grim. Should have been hours. Hooch turned a blind eye. Everyone saw it. George scowled. Crumb's elbow was practically a broom in itself. He played like a thug, and they rewarded him for it. Ginny kicked at a loose stone as they walked. The whole school saw Hogwarts fight together and still lose. That stings more than anything. Neville cleared his throat nervously. I thought you all flew brilliantly. Cedric was proud, I could tell. Everyone was, except... He faltered, glancing at Harry. Harry shook his head, his voice flat. Doesn't matter. We lost. Cho's eyes flicked toward him. It wasn't fair. Everyone knows it. You nearly had the snitch. You outflew him until... She trailed off, not finishing the thought. Until he cheated, George muttered. Exactly, Cho said softly, like she was settling something on Harry's behalf. Ron shoved his hands in his pockets, grumbling. Doesn't change the scoreboard, does it? But it does prove Hogwarts has more guts. Durmstrang can keep their dirty win. They all nodded at that, some of the bitterness easing as they climbed the marble staircase. At last they reached the 5th floor. The mermaid mosaic smirked knowingly at them, tiles glinting under torchlight. The bathroom glowed with steam and candlelight, every tap gushing rainbow foam into the vast pool. The golden egg rested on the marble lip, gleaming in the haze. Cho crouched beside Harry, brushing her hair back as she peered into the water. Ready? Harry nodded, his pulse quickening. Together, they eased the egg under the surface. The instant it sank, the pool vibrated with a strange resonance, low and humming, like a melody pressed into the bones of the water itself. Cho glanced at him, then, without hesitation, leaned forward until her dark hair floated on the surface. Harry mirrored her, and together they dunked their heads beneath the water. The world above vanished in an instant. The melody sharpened into words, ghostly voices weaving through the current. Come seek us where our voices sound. We cannot sing above the ground. And while you're searching, ponder this. We've taken what you'll sorely miss. An hour long you'll have to look, and to recover what we took. The voices faded into a hollow echo, leaving only the muted roar of the taps. Harry pulled back first, gasping, water dripping into his eyes. Cho surfaced a second later, pushing her wet hair behind her shoulders, her face pale but alive with focus. They'll take something, Harry said, his throat tight. Something I'll miss, and I'll have an hour to get it back. Cho nodded, her expression grave. It's a test, not just of strength, but of what you value most. That's what makes it dangerous. She hugged her arms around herself, shivering despite the heat. Ron and Neville leaned forward urgently. What kind of something? Ron pressed. Neville swallowed. Someone, maybe. The words fell heavy in the steamy air. Fred broke the silence with a shaky laugh. So, what? You wrestle mermaids for hostages? That's comforting. George shook his head, his grin absent. It's worse than dragons. At least dragons don't make bargains. Ginny wrapped her arms around herself, voice low. They'll use someone to get to you, Harry. That's the point. Harry clenched his hands, feeling Hermione's gloves pulse faintly with magic. He forced himself to breathe, to steady the fear bubbling in his chest. Cho touched the egg, her fingers resting lightly on the wet gold. Then we plan for it, she said softly but with quiet resolve. She looked at Harry and his heart leapt. For a long moment no one spoke. Neville shifted uneasily, hugging his notes. I should go check Sprout's library again, just in case. Yeah, and I'll start brewing something that lets you breathe underwater for an hour, George said. Deadpan. Fred snorted. If he manages that, I'll name my first child Neville. Ginny shook her head, rolling her eyes, but even she looked pale. Let's regroup tomorrow. No sense standing around guessing. One by one, they gathered their things. Ron clapped Harry on the shoulder on his way out, muttering, You'll manage. You always do. Ginny gave Cho a brief, encouraging smile, and then the door swung closed behind them, leaving the bathroom quiet again. The steam hung heavy in the bathroom after the others left, muffling even the faint drip of condensation from the chandelier. Harry stayed kneeling by the pool, staring at the faint ripples where the egg had been. Cho lingered a few steps away, tightening the strap of her bag. I didn't mean to upset Hermione, she said softly. Harry shook his head. Wait, that wasn't you. She's just caught up in Crumb. His voice faltered, the sour taste of the name still in his mouth. Cho glanced at him, her dark eyes thoughtful. She'll come round. Friends usually do. He nodded, though he wasn't sure he believed it. His hands flexed in the damp gloves, the old enchantment pulsing faintly under his skin. The silence stretched, warm and awkward all at once. Thanks, he said suddenly. Cho blinked. For what? For last night. For tonight. For helping when we didn't have answers. You're the reason we even know what the egg means. Her lips curved into a quiet smile. I just knew something you didn't. That doesn't make me special. It does to me, Harry said before he could stop himself. His face heated. He looked quickly back at the pool, pretending to study the tiles. Cho studied him for a beat, then leaned against the railing, her hair damp and shining in the candlelight. You surprise me, Harry. You're different from the way people talk about you. Less sure of yourself. Harry gave a small crooked smile. That's one way to put it. The steam curled between them. His heart thudded hard enough that he felt it in his throat. He thought of the crowd chanting Crumb's name, of Hermione turning away at the match, of Cho's voice beside him under the water. He swallowed. Cho, I was wondering... He faltered, his courage nearly slipping. She tilted her head, waiting. I mean, you probably already have someone and it's fine if you do, but... He stopped, wincing. He was making a mess of it. What I'm trying to say is, would you come to the Yule Ball with me? The words seemed to hang in the steam like sparks. For a heartbeat, Cho just stared at him, startled. Then, the tension softened out of her shoulders, and a small, genuine smile bloomed. Ha! Finally, she said. Relief crashed over Harry so hard he almost laughed. So, that's a yes? That's a yes, she confirmed, a warmth in her eyes that made the ache of the day fade for the first time. They stood in silence a moment longer, the hum of the enchanted taps filling the air, before Cho shifted her bag onto her shoulder. We should probably find the others before Fred and George start inventing stories about what happened in here. Harry grinned despite himself, the egg tucked tight under his arm. As they stepped into the cool corridor together, the weight of defeat of Hermione and Crumb seemed lighter. The thought of the ball glimmered ahead, fragile but real. By the time Harry reached Gryffindor Tower, the steam from the bathroom had long faded, but the warmth in his chest hadn't. The fat lady swung open with a drowsy harumph, and Harry ducked inside, egg tucked under his arm, Hermione's gloves still damp on his hands. The common room was quiet, except for the fire crackling low in the hearth. 3 figures huddled close around it. Ron, Fred, and George, whispering animatedly. They looked up as Harry stepped in. Fred's eyes narrowed instantly. Well, George leaned forward, grinning. Why are you grinning like an idiot, Potter? Harry froze, realising far too late that his face was giving him away. His cheeks hot, a stupid grin still tugging at his mouth. Ron squinted, then his jaw dropped. You're blushing, smiling. Merlin's beard, Harry, what did you do? Harry stammered, wishing desperately that the floor would swallow him. I might have, asked Cho to the ball. The twins exploded at once, barking like hounds, pounding their fists against the rug in delight. You heard him, George, Fred howled. Our little seeker's grown up. Ron shot to his feet, pointing at Harry like he'd just confessed to a crime. Harry, you bloody dog, you are! You didn't even tell me you were going to ask her. Harry's ears burned, but he couldn't stop grinning. Didn't think I'd get the words out, honestly. Fred collapsed back against the arm of the sofa, still howling. The boy who lived and the boy who scores. George wiped a tear from his eye. Oh, the ball's going to be glorious. Hogwarts won't know what hit it. Harry shook his head, laughing despite himself, the egg warm in his arm and his friend's shouts echoing in the firelight. For the first time in weeks, the weight pressing down on him felt lighter. Fred was still thumping the sofa arm, catching his breath between barks of laughter. All right, Potter, I'll give you this. Didn't think you had it in you. But don't get too smug. George leaned back, smirking like a fox. Because the real prize of the ball is Fleur Delacour, and we've already got a wager going. Harry blinked. A wager? First, Weasley twin to get her to say yes, Fred declared proudly. 1 galleon buy-in, winner takes the pot. Ron, who had just finished crowing, Oh, piss off, he said, laughing. You're both trying to ask Fleur? Obviously, George said breezily. International talent. She deserves the best Hogwarts has to offer. Which is us, Fred added with a flourish. Ron gaped. She's not going to go with either of you. Fred raised a brow. Oh, think you've got better chances? Ron's mouth opened, then closed. His ears somehow grew redder. Harry grinned, seizing the chance. Well, go on then, Ron. Who are you going to ask? Ron shifted on the spot, staring at the fire as though it might offer an escape. I was thinking about asking Padma Patil, he muttered at last. Fred gasped dramatically. Padma! Prefect material! George leaned forward, eyes gleaming. And a Ravenclaw? Blimey, Ron, aiming high for once. Ron swatted at them, but a smile tugged at the corners of his mouth all the same. Shut it. At least I've got someone in mind. Harry laughed, sinking into the armchair nearest the fire. The egg sat heavy and silent in his lap, but, for the moment, with the twins scheming, Ron blushing and the firelight warming the common room, the shadows of Durmstrang's victory felt far away. That week, the corridors were alive with the hum of December, cold drafts slipping through stone archways, scarves and cloaks wrapped tight, and conversations everywhere, circling back to the same topic, the Yule Ball. Everywhere Harry looked, someone was asking someone else. A Hufflepuff tripping over his own feet as he blurted out a question to a Ravenclaw. A pair of third years practicing speeches on each other. A Gryffindor girl sprinting down the hall shrieking, "She said, yes!" Fred and George were the loudest of all. The twins strutted down the main corridor like they owned it, each taking turns one-upping the other in their campaign for Fleur Delacour. Fleur! George boomed in mock French accent, sweeping into a bow so dramatic his bag tumbled off his shoulder. Allow me the honour of accompanying you, the most radiant witch of the age. Fleur tilted her head, a flicker of amusement softening her usual aloof smile. Fred immediately cut in, shoving George aside. Ignore him, Fleur. What you need is a man of subtle charm. Perhaps a serenade? He launched into a mangled attempt at French song, earning a groan from passing Ravenclaws. Fleur laughed, a short, genuine laugh that sent Fred bolting upright in triumph. "Ha!" he shouted, pointing at George. "You heard it! She laughed at me!" "No, she laughed at me, you dumb git," George argued hotly, but the colour in his ears betrayed his defeat. Harry and Ron trailed in their wake, descending into the colder stone of the dungeons. Ron tugged at his scarf, clearly distracted. "So," Ron muttered, lowering his voice, "how do you do it? With Cho, I mean. What did you say? Was it planned?" Harry shrugged, trying to sound casual, even though the memory still made his stomach flip. "Not really. I just asked in the moment," Ron frowned. "In the moment? That's it? That's your advice?" "Pretty much," Harry said, lips twitching. Then, before Ron could protest, Harry spotted Padma Patil coming down the dungeon corridor with a group of Ravenclaws. His grin spread. "Actually, now's your moment." "What? Wait!" Ron sputtered, but Harry gave him a hard shove. Ron stumbled straight into Padma's path, nearly knocking her books out of her arms. "Padma!" he blurted, his ears scarlet. Hi, nice day." Padma raised an eyebrow, steadying her books. "Cold, actually." "Right, yes, cold," Ron stammered, flailing for words. He stood frozen, mouth open, until Harry used his wand to yank his sleeve, grinning as he pretended to read. The Ravenclaws behind her giggled. Ron's panic only deepened. "Anyway, I was wondering, I thought maybe, if you weren't already asked, though someone probably has because, well, why wouldn't they? But if you haven't, then maybe..." He drew a deep breath, his voice squeaking on the last words. "Would you go to the ball with me?" Padma raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by the performance. "That's your way of asking?" Ron froze, horror-struck. Yes?" She let him dangle for a moment, lips twitching, then smiled faintly. "All right, you idiot. Only because you're insufferably charming." Ron gawked at her. "Blimey, is that a yes?" I'll write to you what I'm wearing so we can match, and don't be late." He stood there, grinning like a fool, until Harry appeared in front and started punching Ron's chest in a celebratory way. Ron's ears blazed scarlet, but his grin didn't fade. "Bloody hell," he breathed. "I nearly pissed my pants." They both bent over, laughing as they stumbled down the staircases to potions. Dinner in the Great Hall was a murmur of clinking cutlery and tired voices until the flutter of owls swept through the rafters. A familiar weight dropped onto Harry's plate. The Daily Prophet. He frowned, brushing mashed potatoes off the cover, and then froze. Splashed across the front page in enchanted moving ink. Beauty and the Beast. Victor, Crumb's Forbidden Hogwarts Romance. The picture showed Hermione at the library table beside Crumb, her cheeks pink in the candlelight as he leaned close. The headline swooped and curled, filling every inch of the page with insinuation. Fred leaned over Harry's shoulder, his mouth falling open. "Oh, that's bloody vile!" George snatched the paper, scanning aloud in a mocking sing-song. "The Durmstrang Seeker, adored worldwide, has found solace in the arms of a bright but overlooked Hogwarts bookworm. Their clandestine walks and late-night meetings, proving brains and brawn do attract." Ron's fork clattered against his plate. "Late-night meetings? I'm not sure if I can bloody tell if that's true. It's disgusting, I kind of believe it." His voice cracked and he clamped his mouth shut. But George's eyes went wide as he skimmed further. "Oh, it gets worse. Listen to this. Harry Potter, once again entangled in drama, has apparently sought out Ravenclaw's Cho Chang as his latest distraction. Sources say he was overheard confiding in her about the pressures of fame during a private meeting in the prefect's bathroom." Harry went rigid. His chest tightened, heat flooding his face. "What?" he snapped. How? Cho's eyes widened. The prefect's bathroom? But no one was there. She snatched the paper and scanned it. That nosy cow! How in Merlin's name does she know that? Harry's thoughts raced, their conversation replaying in his head. The steam, the egg, Cho's soft smile, his own words about Skeeter and the ministry. It was all there, twisted into gossip. His fists clenched inside Hermione's damp gloves. She wasn't there, he muttered half to himself. She couldn't have been there. Ron slammed his palm flat on the table. First Hermione, now you. She's making things up. No, Harry said sharply. She quoted me, word for word. The group fell silent. The hall's chatter swirled around them, oblivious. Harry felt the weight of eyes and turned instinctively. Across the room, Hermione sat with Crumb at the Durmstrang table, a copy of the Prophet in her hands. Her face was pale, her mouth pressed tight. Their eyes met for one flicker of a heartbeat. Then, almost in the same instant, they both looked away. Harry's jaw locked. The warmth he'd carried from Cho's yes felt fragile now, like glass. Skeeter had found her way into places she had no right to be, and Hermione. Hermione was sitting with Crumb. The rest of the table seethed. Fred crumpled the Prophet in his fist. George swore under his breath. Ron stabbed a potato so hard it split open. Cho kept her gaze lowered, her expression unreadable. Harry didn't touch his food. His anger wasn't just about Skeeter. It was about how close her lies came to truths he hadn't wanted named. He looked at Cho again and saw her anger. Most were reading the article and looking at them, which only made things worse. He took Cho's hand and walked through the great hall. Snickering and taunting followed them. He pushed the great doors open and led her out of public view. Torches sputtered along the walls, their flames throwing restless shadows across old stone. The winter wind whistled faintly through drafty corridors, rattling high windows where frost feathered the glass. Harry and Cho walked in silence at first, their footsteps muffled by the rugs that lined the long hallways. They turned corners into places Harry had never been. Unused classrooms with dust motes swirling like golden snow in the torchlight, winding staircases that led nowhere, balconies that overlooked courtyards drowned in moonlight. Finally, Cho broke the silence. She makes it sound like I'm a prop in your story. Her voice carried a bitter edge. Like I don't exist except as Harry Potter's distraction. Harry grimaced. She does that to everyone. Half the things Skeeter writes about me aren't even close to true. Cho arched a brow, her lips twitching. Only? Half? Harry let out a short laugh. Fine. 3/4. The rest is just exaggerated until I don't recognize myself. They ducked through a narrow arch into a gallery lined with cracked suits of armor. The helmets turned lazily to watch them pass, one giving a hollow cough of dust. Still, Cho murmured, it stings. Reading that, Harry hesitated. Because it's about me. Because it's about me, she corrected. Then, softer. And because it almost sounded like she was in the room with us. That's what frightens me. They walked past a tall, arched window where the lake shimmered black and endless below. The moonlight washed across her face, turning her features pale and thoughtful. Harry shoved his hands into his pockets. I don't know how she does it, but she'll slip up. People like Skeeter always do. Cho looked at him sideways. Spoken like an insufferable optimist. Harry smiled. Better than being insufferably cynical. Cho tilted her head in agreement. They turned another corner and came to a spiral staircase that wound upward into a turret. The stones were colder here, the torches dimmer. At the top, they found a small round room with open arches on every side. The night air spilled in, sharp and bracing, and the view stretched across the grounds. The forbidden forest crouched like a black sea of trees, the towers of the castle glowing faintly in the moonlight, the lake glimmering like glass. Cho leaned against the archway, her breath clouding in the cold. "It's beautiful up here. I've never seen it from this angle." Harry stood beside her, shoulders brushing hers. "Me neither. Guess I've been too busy almost dying every year." She laughed, covering her mouth. "You shouldn't joke about that." "It's the only way I get through it," Harry admitted, grinning despite himself. They stood there a long while, trading little quips about teachers. Cho mimicking Professor Flitwick squeaking about wand technique, Harry imitating Snape's disdain for Quidditch. Their laughter echoed softly in the turret, warm against the cold air. Then Cho's voice turned quieter. "You know, for all the noise, it feels calm here." Harry nodded, his breath clouding in front of him. "Yeah, for once." She glanced at him, her smile faint but genuine. "Thanks for pulling me out of the hall. I needed this." Harry met her eyes, feeling the rush of warmth again, the same one that had carried him since the bathroom. "Me too," he said. The castle seemed to breathe around them, the torches flickering lower, the night deeper. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had narrowed to just the two of them and the quiet winter sky. They looked at each other and slowly began to lean closer, when suddenly a voice floated up from the grounds below, echoing against the castle walls. "Fleur, ma chérie, allow me to sing to you the Ballad of Love." The sound was so loud and off-key that Harry flinched. Cho blinked, then clapped a hand over her mouth to hide a laugh. They leaned over the arch to peer down into the courtyard. Sure enough, Fred Weasley stood below in the snow-dusted grass, one hand clutching his heart, the other waving a ridiculous bouquet of charmed holly that kept snapping at him with its spiky leaves. "Your eyes, more beautiful than all the stars in the sky," Fred bellowed, spinning so dramatically that his holly bouquet smacked him across the face. George appeared behind him, clutching a lute he'd clearly stolen from the music corridor. "You're butchering it," he shouted, before strumming a chord so violently the lute snapped a string. "Let a true artist serenade her." Fleur stood a few feet away, looking equal parts amused and exasperated. Her arms were folded, her silvery hair catching the moonlight, as she murmured something in French under her breath. Cho pressed her forehead against the stone, shoulders shaking with laughter. "Are they always like this?" Harry sighed, though he couldn't help a grin. "Always. And they've got a bet about who can get her to say yes. This is round 2, I think." Down below, Fleur folded her arms, her silvery hair gleaming in the torchlight. She let them finish their absurd routines. Fred ending on one knee in the snow, George snapping his lute string mid-serenade, before finally sighing. "This is ridiculous," she said, her accent crisp and unimpressed. Then, with a sly flicker of a smile, "Meet me in the entrance hall, the day of the ball. I will make my decision between you two then." The twins froze, their jaws dropping in unison. "You mean," Fred began, "you're actually—" George sputtered, but Fleur only swept past them, her cloak swirling behind her as she disappeared into the night. The courtyard erupted with laughter from the students watching from the windows. Below, Fred and George turned to each other, their faces identical masks of shock. Then, simultaneously, "She totally wants me!" they shouted. "She winked at me!" George barked back. They started bickering, voices carrying loudly up the walls, until George grabbed Fred's holly bouquet, and Fred tried to wrestle the broken lute from George. Harry laughed with her, but something suddenly caught his attention. A beetle, glossy and black, was perched on the stone ledge not 2 inches from Cho's hand. Its antennae twitched, its little body catching the torchlight. Harry frowned. leaning ever so slightly toward it. Something about the way it sat there, still, almost watchful, sent a prickle down his neck. "Harry?" Cho tilted her head, noticing his focus. Before he could answer, the beetle scurried sideways, vanishing into a crack in the stone, gone as quickly as it had appeared. Harry straightened, his brow furrowed. "What was it?" Cho asked. "Nothing," Harry muttered. "We should head back now. It's getting late." Cho agreed and led the way back. The next morning, the castle still buzzed with ball talk, laughter spilling through the draughty corridors. Harry made his way down toward the courtyard, Molly Weasley's letter tucked into his pocket. She'd asked him to meet her in Hogsmeade that afternoon. Just to check in, as she put it, and the thought of her familiar warmth was a small comfort after Skeeter's poison. As he rounded a corner near one of the lesser-used stairwells, movement caught his eye. Mr. Crouch stood half hidden in the shadows of an alcove, his stiff ministry robes rumpled. Beside him, Winky the house elf wrung her hands around an empty butterbeer bottle. Her large eyes darted nervously as she swayed on her feet, ears drooping. Harry slowed, frowning. "You can't just keep drinking from failure," Crouch hissed, his voice sharp but low. His hand twitched like he wanted to grip Winky's shoulder, but didn't dare. "You have to keep looking for him," Winky whimpered, the bottle clinking against the stone floor as she shifted. "But Master, Quiet!" Crouch snapped, his eyes flicking down the corridor. Harry looked quickly away, pretending to adjust his bag strap. His pulse quickened, but he kept walking. It wasn't his business, he told himself. He had enough on his plate without getting tangled in another ministry mess. Still, the image lingered. Winky, shaking, the bottle glinting in the torchlight, and Crouch's words echoing in his ears. Looking for him. Harry pushed the thought aside as he stepped out into the cold December air. Molly Weasley was waiting, and for once he wanted to let someone else worry about the world. Outside, the wind cut sharp across the Hogsmeade path, the snow squeaking under Harry's boots. He spotted her before she spotted him. Molly Weasley, bundled in a thick cloak, waiting near the 3 broomsticks, with a stout black dog sitting loyally at her side. "Harry dear," Molly's arms were open before he could say a word. She swept him into a hug so fierce it made the cold vanish for a moment. The dog padded forward and sniffed Harry's hand, then gave it a sloppy lick before curling up at Molly's feet. Harry felt warmth stir in his chest. Sirius. "Come on, love, inside," Molly said, bustling him toward the inn. "No sense in freezing out here." The 3 broomsticks smelled of butterbeer and cinnamon, its windows fogged with warmth. Molly found them a corner booth, and Sirius slunk under the table, lying across Harry's boots with a heavy, comforting weight. So then, Molly began once they'd settled, her eyes soft behind her spectacles. "How are you? Classes treating you well?" Harry blinked. No mention of the tournament, no mention of Skeeter, just normal. It was exactly what he didn't realise he'd needed. "They're fine," he said honestly. "Lot of work, but manageable." Molly beamed. "Good lad, that's what I like to hear. Merlin knows with everything going on, a bit of focus is the best gift you can give yourself." She went on, telling him about her work, how she'd helped a group of frightened second years last week, how Dumbledore had thanked her personally for the role she'd been playing in keeping the castle calm during the tournament frenzy. "He's a remarkable man, Harry, always taking time to encourage me, even with the weight of the whole school and ministry on his shoulders." Harry leaned forward. "You've seen him recently?" "Dumbledore, I feel like he's been distant." Molly reached across and patted his hand. "He's keeping you safe. The ministry's watching him like hawks, and Fudge has half a mind to clip his wings if he can. So, he stays away, gives you space. Don't mistake distance for neglect, dear. He's protecting you the only way he can." Also, he's busy on certain cases recently. Harry felt the knot in his stomach ease. He hadn't realised how much he needed someone to just say that. They talked a while longer, Sirius shifting now and then under the table, pressing a paw against Harry's shoe as though reminding him he wasn't alone. Then Molly's eyes twinkled as she leaned in conspiratorially. Now, the Yule Ball. You've got a partner, I assume? Harry coughed into his butterbeer. Yeah, of course, Molly said warmly. Hermione, I'd imagine? Harry hesitated. No, she's going with Crumb. Molly went very still. The smile faded from her lips, replaced by a shiver Harry almost saw run through her shoulders. Crumb, she repeated quietly, as if tasting the word. Then she forced herself to nod. Thank you for telling me, dear. I'll keep an eye on her. Harry swallowed. I'm taking Cho Chang. His face warmed just saying her name. I really like her. Just nervous about the dancing part. Molly's expression softened, the worry easing as she smiled again, though there was a sad edge to it. Oh, Harry, it's a mother's privilege to teach her sons to dance. You can't go to a ball and just shuffle your feet. Harry chuckled nervously. You'd really teach me. Of course I would. We'll find a quiet corner these next couple of days, and I'll show you the steps. By the end of it, you'll be leading. Harry's smile grew wider than it had in weeks. Thanks, Mrs. Weasley. And you leave the shopping to me, too, she added briskly. You and Ron together? You'd come back with a pair of moth-eaten cloaks and call them dress robes. Absolutely not. Harry laughed properly this time, shaking his head. Under the table, Sirius pressed his paw gently against Harry's shoe, as if seconding Molly's promise. Then Harry noticed the window. Not the glass itself, but the shapes moving beyond it. Red and gold, heavy cloaks, a cluster of people gathered too tightly for anything good. Molly, Harry said quietly. She followed his gaze. Her face changed instantly, not to fear, but to focus. Sirius, she said softly. Padfoot lifted his head from where he lay beneath the table. Out the back, Molly murmured. Now! The black dog rose without a sound and slipped away, paws whispering against the floorboards. A moment later, the door opened. The cold rushed in first. Then, the ministry. Aurors stepped inside, boots damp with melting frost, their expressions drawn and tired. A few muttered orders, low and clipped. The chatter in the pub faltered, then died, replaced by a hush that felt too heavy for a place like this. And then Dumbledore entered. He paused just inside the doorway, eyes sweeping the room. Not searching, not hunting, just taking stock. He looked older in that moment, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper, his usual brightness dimmed by something Harry couldn't quite name. Dumbledore saw him. His gaze softened just a fraction. He crossed the room, the murmur of the pub rising behind him, and stopped beside their table. Harry, he said gently. Molly. Albus, Molly replied, her voice steady, though her hand had curled tight around her teacup. Dumbledore inclined his head. Thank you for keeping him warm, he said, and for a heartbeat it felt like he meant more than just the room. Harry hesitated. Dumbledore lifted a hand, not in warning, just in quiet interruption. I'm afraid the world is being very unkind today, he said softly, that this is not the place for it. He looked at Harry then, really looked at him as if weighing how much of the truth he could afford to carry. What happened? Harry asked abruptly. Dumbledore looked at him carefully before speaking. Unfortunately, Harry, it is not for me to say. Just know that it is nothing pleasant, and will require my undivided attention for a while. Harry stared into the dwindling twinkle in his eyes. Take care of yourself, Dumbledore added. And remember to keep those who love you close in these times." Before Harry could respond, a wizard called Dumbledore's name from near the bar, his voice urgent. Dumbledore straightened. "I must go," he said. "Good day, Molly. Harry." And then he was gone again, swept back into a world of hushed voices and grim faces and things no one was saying out loud. The door closed behind him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Molly reached across the table and squeezed Harry's hand. "Finish your drink," she said quietly. "Cold doesn't do you any good." Harry nodded, though his eyes kept drifting to the door. Somewhere, just beyond the warmth of the pub, something terrible happened, and no one was talking about it. The Gryffindor common room hummed with anticipation. Students darted between staircases, showing off half-tied cravats and robes still bristling with wrinkles, laughter and nerves buzzing in the air. The enchanted holly garlands above the fireplace twinkled merrily, as if mocking their panic. Up in the dormitory, it was chaos. Ron stood before the mirror, yanking furiously at his dress robes. They were a shade of green that could charitably be called swampy. The lace cuffs drooped like wilted flowers. "Mum swore these were charming," he muttered, ears glowing scarlet. "They're murder, that's what they are." "Look on the bright side," Fred said cheerfully, adjusting his tie with one hand and flicking his wand at George with the other to fix his collar. "If Fleur laughs, at least she'll be laughing at you instead of us." George smirked, twirling his cufflinks. "Not that she'll be laughing. She'll be swooning, naturally." Ron snorted. "She said to meet her in the hall. She's stringing you both along for sport." "Rubbish," Fred said quickly. "That was definitely a wink at me." "It was a sigh at me," George countered. Harry laughed, shaking his head as he buttoned the front of his new dress robes. Molly's shopping eye had saved him. His were simple black with neat silver trim, nothing flashy but well-fitted. For once, he didn't feel like he'd been shoved into Dudley's cast-offs. "You're quiet," Ron said, eyeing him in the mirror. "What's it like knowing you're walking in with Cho Chang?" Harry felt heat creep up his neck. "Terrifying," he admitted. "I have to lead everyone with the other champions, remember. I'll be front, place and centre, whether I like it or not." Ron raised an eyebrow. "You're seriously more nervous about waltzing in front of people than walking into Dragonfire? Blimey, mate, that's kind of pathetic." Harry shot a look. "Trust me, if I had to wear that in front of everyone," Harry said, pointing at Ron's robes, "I think I would prefer the dragon to fry me." Dean, Seamus and the twins burst into laughter, while Ron acted like he didn't hear them. Beneath the teasing, nerves coiled tight in his chest. He thought of Molly guiding him through steps in a quiet corner of the 3 broomsticks, her gentle 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 still echoing in his head. He hoped it would be enough. Neville appeared at the doorway, tugging uncertainly at his tie. Does this look right? I think I'm strangling myself." Ron gave an exasperated groan. "We're a disaster." But when they finally trooped down into the common room together, Ron's lace fluttering, Fred and George trading barbs, Neville tugging nervously at his collar, Harry smoothing his sleeves, the atmosphere shifted. The firelight caught their robes, their nerves, their grins. For all the chaos, they looked like boys about to step into something bigger than their egos can handle. Fred clapped Harry on the back as they reached the portrait hole. "Ready, Potter?" Harry swallowed, his heart thrumming. "Not even a little." "Good," George said with a grin. "Means you'll remember it." The portrait swung open, and the music from below drifted up faintly through the stone. The entrance hall glittered with lantern light, the music from the great hall pulsing faintly beyond the doors. Students clustered in groups, laughter and nerves spilling across the marble floor. Fred and George were still elbowing one another when Fleur swept past, her robes shimmering like liquid silver. She paused just long enough to say, "The entrance hall. Tonight. I will make my choice then," before gliding away. The twins froze, staring after her like stunned statues as the crowd laughed. But Harry hardly noticed, because Cho was walking toward him. Her robes were the colour of winter sky, pale ice blue with silver threads that caught every flicker of light. Her hair shone dark against the fabric, and when she smiled at him, Harry's stomach flipped. "You look nice, Harry," she said warmly. Wow," he stammered. "You look amazing." His face went hot. Before he could say more, a hush rippled through the crowd. At the top of the staircase stood Hermione. For a heartbeat, Harry forgot to breathe. Her periwinkle blue dress floated around her like water, her hair sleek and shining. He had never seen her like this, makeup softening her features, her expression nervous but radiant. They caught each other's eyes for just a moment. Harry's cheeks burned. "What's wrong?" Cho asked, tilting her head curiously. He blinked hard, shaking himself. "Nothing. Just nervous for the dance." Cho's eyes softened. "Me too. But my mum always said nerves are just excitement waiting to be turned into something good. You'll be fine." Harry's lips tugged into a smile. "Thanks. That helps." The knot in his chest loosened. He focused on Cho's presence beside him, the warmth of her reassurance, and the music waiting just beyond the doors. The crowd's whispers grew as Victor Crumb appeared beside Hermione, stiff and brooding. He offered his hand, and she took it with a smile that sent a visible shockwave through the hall. Ron went rigid, muttering under his breath, while Fred and George's smirks melted into guarded glares. Then McGonagall swept out, tartan robes flaring. "Champions with your partners, please." Harry swallowed and offered his arm to Cho. She slid her hand through with a graceful smile, and they moved to the front of the line. Behind them, Fleur extended her hand toward Fred. For a wild moment, he froze. But then he squared his shoulders and, looking every inch the gentleman, took it. He shot George a triumphant smirk as they fell into line. The doors to the Great Hall swung open. Harry tightened his grip on Cho's hand, heart pounding, not from nerves now, but from a flicker of excitement, just as she'd said. The doors to the Great Hall opened. Frosted garlands twined around the pillars. Enchanted snow drifted lazily from the ceiling, only to vanish before touching the floor, and the 4 house banners shimmered above the tables, now transformed into tiers of sparkling white. The champions filed in to polite applause, Harry leading the way with Cho at his side. He swallowed hard as the music swelled, the golden glow of the enchanted orchestra spilling across the dance floor. "Ready?" Cho whispered, her hand tightening in his. Harry exhaled. "As I'll ever be." McGonagall gave a sharp nod. The orchestra struck the opening notes, and the champion stepped forward. Harry placed his hand on Cho's waist, just as Molly had shown him, and they began to move. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. His feet carried the rhythm almost on instinct. Cho guided him with a steady grace, and soon enough, Harry realised he wasn't stumbling, wasn't crushing her toes. He was dancing. "You're good," Cho said with a surprised giggle as they spun beneath the glimmering snowflakes. Harry grinned, a flush rising in his cheeks. "Thanks. My friend's mum drilled me." Cho laughed as she spun. They turned, and for the first time, Harry didn't feel like he was chasing the music. He was part of it, the world narrowing to the warmth of Cho's hand and the swirl of robes around them. Across the floor, Hermione glided with Victor Crumb, their movements elegant, practiced. Ron shuffled stiffly with Padma, muttering apologies as he nearly tripped over his own lace cuffs. Fred, to the astonishment of many, managed a smooth twirl with Fleur, his grin cocky as George fumed from the sidelines. The crowd clapped in rhythm, the music sweeping higher. Harry spun Cho again, her dress catching the lantern light like frost on glass. She laughed, bright, unguarded, and Harry laughed too, the sound surprising even himself. For once, he wasn't the boy who lived, or a tournament champion, or Skeeter's latest headline. He was just a boy dancing with a girl he really liked, the hall alive with music and colour around them. When the orchestra reached its final flourish, Harry and Cho finished their turn cleanly, breaths mingling as they stilled. The applause erupted around them. Cho beamed. See? Excitement! Harry squeezed her hand, smiling wider than he thought possible. Yeah, excitement. The wizard band struck up a new rhythm, drums booming and violins shrieking as magic rippled through the hall. The snowflakes above transformed into glittering sparks of light that burst in time with the music. Upperclassmen slipped, laughing into corners, passing around shimmering goblets of potions that left trails of smoke curling from their lips. A group of seventh years conjured floating lanterns that bobbed above their heads like drunken fireflies. Near the centre of the floor, students had formed a circle around the band. What started as polite dancing exploded into a magical mosh pit, sparks flying as shoes lit up with charms. A pair of Ravenclaws started levitating first years, who cheered wildly as they crowd-surfed overhead. "This is the greatest night ever!" squealed a tiny Hufflepuff, flailing happily as she soared across the hall. Filch tore through the crowd, his lantern swinging wildly. "Stop that! No levitation, no crowd surfing! You there, hand over that goblet!" The first years shrieked with laughter, vanishing into the mass of bodies before he could catch them. Cho tugged Harry toward the dance floor again, her eyes bright with mischief. "Come on, Potter. Time to prove Molly's lessons were worth it." Harry laughed, the noise of the ball washing over him in a rush of light, colour and sound. For once, the weight of the tournament slipped from his shoulders. Tonight, he was just another student, swept up in the wild, ridiculous joy of Hogwarts.